Oh,
you're a teenager.
welcome everyone to this week's episode of Mind Power Meets Mystic. I am Michelle Walters, the Mind Power hypnosis part of the equation, and I am joined today by my co-host Cinthia Varkevisser, who is our show resident mystic. And Cinthia, would you please read the bio of our special guest today?
Yes, today I'm extremely excited to welcome Gail Nott. She is a certified professional diversity coach for soulpreneurs, SOUL, not SOLO, for soulpreneurs. She coaches purpose-driven business owners to grow their business that saves them time, shares their message, and allows them to create their legacy without sacrificing their personal life. She is an expert at building a business around your life instead of the other way around, with over 20 years experience in marketing, sales, and personal development. In her previous profession, she quickly filled her massage practice and grew a holistic wellness center to over 40 practitioners. Today, Gail's clients build lifestyle businesses based on their values, gifts, and passions. Now, we have a great story because Gail and I met each other almost 20 years ago. Welcome, Gail Nott.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Gail, I have to say, it was really fun to tell Michelle that I had met you so long ago in a quasi BNI setting
Mhm.
called Friends of Mine. And I know this is already off topic, but because we're all business people and in a soul aligned uh, profession, all three of us, really quick, let's talk about really quickly about how that didn't work, as beautiful as it was, and how many amazing people that we met.
Yeah, I love the people in the group. The funny thing is, it was like you mentioned before when we were speaking earlier about it, is that it was an alternative to a structured program like BNI. And BNI does have its faults. One of its strengths is that structure. They have a built-in system where there are continual volunteers, and there's also someone who owns it as a business. So even if all the volunteers fell off, that person is still committed to keeping it going. They will find the next round of volunteers. And even now, as it's growing worldwide, I've heard that there are less entrepreneurial owners, and now like the corporate headquarters is starting to run them. So I think there's pros and cons to that, because then you don't necessarily have an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily have an entrepreneurial minded person running an organization that's supposed to be for business owners. But if they find the right person, maybe it works. But yes, that the Friends of My Networking group was a lovely group of people, of definitely purpose driven, soul driven, and but not necessarily driven to keep a networking group going, which is
Right,
fine. Yeah.
right. Well, it's a funny thing that when, first of all, Michelle, I'm going to throw you in here for the people who don't know what BNI is. So if you could explain what BNI stands for and what
Sure.
that's about.
Yeah. So I joined BNI maybe a year and a half ago or so. It's been a really helpful leg of me getting to meet a lot of people and getting to sort of increase my visibility and credibility with other professional people in my area and in my network. It's been a really helpful component for things. It is a varied. I've invited Cinthia for our listeners, and Cinthia comes and says, "There's too many rules," because BNI does have a lot of rules. But it is, I think, in large part that structure and those rules that is part of what makes it gives it a lot of energy that it can sort of keep going. And I think maybe why your previous group had a hard time, keeping things up, because it does take an enormous amount of energy to keep networking groups alive, thriving, changing, growing, expanding, doing all the things they need to do. I want to talk about how that fits in the life of Miss Knott here, who just told us as we were prepping for our session today that she had a wellness center and that her wellness center was actually in Pleasant Hill, which happens to be where my office is. And I don't remember it being here, but I wasn't in this area at the time that the wellness center was operating. I want to understand a little bit more from you, Gail. What you've done a lot of things. You've done the wellness center with massage therapists, you've done marketing, now you do business coaching. How does the through line of spirituality fit with
Mm,
your growth through your career? Does that
that's
make sense as a question?
yeah, yeah. Because there are times when I'm disconnected to my spirituality and disconnected to what I believe in with my spirituality is to the world as a whole. And when I close in and as a protection method to protect myself and I kind of cut myself off, I actually lose touch of what I really want to do, who I really am. And it's kind of it's a little challenging because I get this message from our culture that, oh, you're supposed to grow bigger, you're supposed to make lots of money, you're supposed to be a millionaire. Like even with coaching, who am I if I'm not a six-figure coach or $1 million coach? Or, especially as a business coach, does that mean I'm successful or not? So the through line with my spirituality is that when I am connected to my soul and to my purpose and let go of cultural and societal expectations, that's where I thrive. And the money flows, the abundance flows. Whether I'm giving, receiving, I believe it really is a circular experience. And I'm in this journey right now where it's just a few years ago where I wasn't sure if I even believed in God anymore. And when I say God, I mean more of a term to label spiritual connection. For a long time, I've been triggered by the word God because I grew up in a religious household. And so God to me was like this white guy who would always punish you if you said a bad word or had sex before marriage or, anything like that you're not supposed to do. And as I got reconnected to my spirituality of like, okay, what do I really believe in? Eh, I started going to spiritual communities, and sometimes they would use the word God as a placeholder for
Mhm.
what cannot always be described. I had to work through it. Of like when they say the word God, it's not white God.
Right, right, right.
It is being, it is whole, it's connectedness. Um, and yeah, that's just something that I'm still working through. But at the same time, it's almost like if I'm working through it, like I'm pushing through I'm not connected. So sometimes I just have to kind of just like, it just is. It's just what it is. It's that connection. I can feel it. I don't have to describe it because if I describe it, then I go into the left brain mode and uh start, I don't know, start having to vocalize it, which I know is challenging because we're on a podcast. But it is
It
something that's
is, but
more of a
it
feeling.
makes sense to me, Gail. We
Yeah.
actually started off this podcast with a different show name. The
Oh,
original show name of our podcast was called It's All Connected because
oh,
we see the world as being pretty much all connected, one thing to another.
yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is that when you're when you're operating in that place of being deeply connected to your soul and your soul purpose,
Mm-hmm.
that's when business arrives. That's when abundance flows. That's when sort of all of the energy is in motion and in transit
Right.
and and the best things happen.
Yeah.
And that in itself can be God, right? Because that
Mm-hmm.
is, it's the flow of being in, it's about being in the greater flow.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get it. I like to call my God, I like to call it um more like 5D, where you are just in alignment. There's no time, there's no space. It just is, just like you said.
This is.
So I understand, I completely understand where you're coming from, especially when we start talking about business and how we are soul aligned and purpose driven,
Mm-hmm.
because that inevitably comes up in a certain way. And here's the funny thing that I find is that your clients don't bring it up for you, they bring it up on themselves. So in a way, we all have to have our definition in order to be able to guide everyone to their definition. At least that's right. Do you agree? I mean, I like thinking about Michelle, who didn't eat sugar or drink any alcohol so that she would be in alignment to do her hypnotherapy for stop overeating sugar and drinking less, So you and I, we are all, I believe, in the same place. So you're right. There is no definition to it because I believe that God is a state that our vocabulary is very limited. And so we just haven't created the language yet.
Right.
I think that's true. I want to remind all of our listeners right now that they are here with us and Mind Power Meets Mystic with me, Michelle Walters, and my co-host, Cinthia Varkevisser. We are honored today to be with Miss Gail Nott. Gail is a business coach, presently, one of many, many things in Gail's timeline of successes. And she's here talking with us today about how spirituality fits into her job and her work. I find this whole topic really interesting because I worked for so many years in corporate. And, in corporate, you can't use the word God. You can't talk about sort of a higher power. You can't really talk about like the synchronicity of things. Like these are all topics that are very much taboo. And one of the things that I have really loved about being my own business person is having the freedom to acknowledge these things, to tap into them, to go places that traditional businesses might not want to go. Do you find that is something that comes up as you work with your clients, Gail?
Yeah, definitely. It's something where I don't necessarily put that on my label because I do have friends who are spiritual coaches, spiritual life coaches, maybe even a spiritual business coach. So I'm not at that place. Maybe I will be someday. However, when I'm working with a client, I see them for who they are. And if they're attracted to me, they're attracted to work with me because of that, because we have this common value of universal connection. We may not say it in a business session, like we're talking about their social media or their marketing. I'm not going to bring up, so how does God fit in with this? But I may say things like purpose. What is your purpose? What is your why? Even just having them trust their gut.
Mhm.
What do you feel like is the next best step for you? And you could see them, they might move their eyes up. One of the skills I'm trained in is NLP, neuro linguistic programming, so they may move their eyes up to either side or to down, and you could see them connecting to, I believe, to their spirit. They may not label it that, but I see that connection. So the more that I can support them in trusting their gut, trusting their intuition, connecting with purpose, the more successful I know they're going to be. Now, there is the reality of making money, of accepting money, but that's usually an issue with more of how they value their own worth versus attracting the right clients. And so that's something that I'm I'm actually getting training more into is money mindset because it comes up all the time. So how they value money, how they can see it as more of an energy exchange. And I'm really loving the business owners I'm meeting through social media. I know social media definitely has its faults as well, but I'm meeting more business owners who have embraced how money is this energy exchange, and then they've also have created business models so that if a lack of funds is an issue, there's still some way that a potential client could work with them, whether it's through a recording or a book or a video or payment plans or even sliding scale. I used to be taught that sliding scale was like a no-no. You don't do sliding scale. But I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see it, and I've really tried to sort of set up my business in such a way that I can serve people, with a free event or an inexpensive recording, or because, sometimes it's the right time to make that kind of investment in oneself. And sometimes that investment needs to wait for, more energy to come, right? I think that's one way I like to think about it.
Yeah, definitely.
What's
Let's talk.
next, Gail?
Oh, what's next for me? Speaking of changing up business models, because I am preparing to homeschool my daughter, we're going to do a style of homeschooling called unschooling or self-directed education, where she gets to decide what she wants to learn. And then I help provide the resources, whether it's a class or books or field trips, field trip slash travel, which I'm looking forward to. So since I'm preparing to homeschool my daughter, I want even more freedom in my business. So I am decreasing my private coaching hours and increasing and opening up my membership program where people can join my program called Lift. I'm going to start it at, depending on when this gets published, it's going to start off at $9 a month for just the first few people to test it out. And then I'll slowly increase it as I get feedback on how I grow it. But that way people get support in their business. It is a very accessible and affordable rate, obviously, but they'll get training on marketing, sales, business model, and coaching. I think I'm going to provide a monthly coaching call. I think that would be the right energy exchange there. But then in our online platform, they can always post something and I can comment back. And that way, if I'm with my daughter and we're traveling to, she loves Yellowstone. She wants to go to Yellowstone again. If we're in Yellowstone, I've got a signal. I could answer someone's question without having to worry about hopping on live on a Zoom call with them. So that's what's next. I'm opening up Lyft again and hoping that it will be an accessible and effective way to support business owners and solopreneurs in growing their business.
I love it. I think that sounds fantastic. I think it sounds like an enormous value to get to work with somebody like you with so much experience in developing businesses and helping people with their marketing. I, I worked in corporate marketing for years. And when I shifted over to doing solopreneur marketing, I was like, I got this. It is such a different can of worms. So I think it is fantastic, Gail, that you are out there helping people with, personal advice as to how to organize this and how to get it done, because it's hard work. It's a lot of work. It's hard, and I like to make things easy, but I think it's just really a lot of work.
Yeah, it definitely can be. If we look at it, just getting the word out and then working on our own stuff when it comes to promoting ourselves and be able to say what's great about what we do. But I think if we just focus on who we're helping, it makes it much easier.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on Mind Power Meets Mystic today.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see both of you.